Imagine being forced to do something humiliating just because of the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened when a black man was unfairly singled out by a racist cop and made to clean up trash on the street. It was a shocking display of power, but what happened next left everyone speechless. This officer thought he could get away with it, but little did he know, karma was right around the corner. As the man picked up the garbage, something completely unexpected turned the situation upside down. What started as an act of discrimination quickly became a lesson no one saw coming. Stick around as we dive into this unbelievable story that proves justice can come in the most surprising ways. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds. The day started like any other for James, a hard-working man just trying to get through his routine. But everything changed when he crossed paths with Officer Reynolds, a cop known around town for his tough attitude. James hadn't done anything wrong, just walking home from work, when suddenly, the officer pulled up and accused him of littering. Before James could even explain, Reynolds handed him a trash bag and ordered him to start cleaning up the street. People passing by watched in silence, unsure whether to step in or just keep moving. James felt the weight of humiliation, but deep down he knew something wasn't right. As he picked up piece after piece of trash, a quiet determination grew inside him. Meanwhile, Officer Reynolds stood there with a smug look, thinking he was in control. But what neither of them knew was that something unexpected was about to change everything. James kept his head down, his hands moving slowly as he picked up the trash scattered along the sidewalk. He could feel the eyes of strangers on him, some filled with pity, others with quiet judgment. The humiliation burned inside, but he refused to let it break him. Officer Reynolds leaned against his patrol car, arms crossed, watching with a satisfied smirk. To him, this was just another day of showing who was in charge. But what he didn't notice was the small crowd beginning to form nearby. Among them was Sarah, a local business owner who had seen too much of this kind of treatment before. She pulled out her phone and started recording, capturing every moment. A few others followed suit, murmuring among themselves about what they were witnessing. James noticed the cameras but stayed focused, his mind racing. He knew this wasn't just about him. This was bigger. What would happen next could change everything. James felt the weight of the moment growing heavier with each piece of trash he picked up. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept moving, knowing that stopping wasn't an option. The quiet murmurs from the crowd turned into hushed conversations, and he could hear the faint sound of cameras clicking and recording. Officer Reynolds, oblivious to the rising tension, stood tall with an air of confidence, convinced that he was teaching James a lesson. But he didn't realize that the lesson was about to take an unexpected turn. Sarah's video had already started gaining traction online, and within minutes, more people arrived, some familiar faces from the neighborhood, others drawn by the buzz spreading through social media. James noticed the shift in the crowd's energy. People weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for something to happen. A voice from the crowd finally spoke up, challenging the officer's actions. Reynolds' expression hardened, but for the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Something was about to give. Before Officer Reynolds could respond, another police car pulled up to the scene, its sirens cutting through the tension in the air. A senior officer stepped out, his sharp gaze moving between James, the crowd, and Reynolds. Whispers spread like wildfire as people wondered if justice was finally catching up. James stood frozen, his heart pounding, unsure of what this meant for him. The senior officer approached slowly, his expression unreadable, and without hesitation, he asked Reynolds to step aside for a word. The crowd leaned in, sensing that something big was about to happen. Reynolds' confident posture faltered for the first time, his jaw tightening as he followed orders. Meanwhile, Sarah kept recording, zooming in on their tense conversation. No one could hear what was being said, but the frustration on Reynolds' face was clear. James exchanged glances with Sarah, feeling a flicker of hope. But just as the crowd thought they had seen it all, another unexpected figure emerged, James' employer, who had just arrived after seeing the video online. Now the situation had grown even bigger, and James realized this was no longer just about him. As James' employer stepped forward, the crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. He walked straight up to Officer Reynolds, his voice calm but firm. "This man works for me," he said, placing a reassuring hand on James' shoulder. "He's not a troublemaker. He's one of the hardest workers I know." The senior officer listened carefully, glancing between Reynolds and James. Meanwhile, Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, realizing the situation was slipping out of his control. Then, in a surprising turn, the senior officer asked James directly, "Is there anything you'd like to say?" James took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the emotion building inside him. "I just want to be treated with respect, like anyone else." His words struck a chord with the crowd, and a ripple of agreement spread through them. Just when it seemed like justice had prevailed, another twist came. The senior officer revealed that Reynolds had been under review for previous complaints, and this incident might be the last straw. Reynolds' face turned pale, and without another word, he was escorted to his car. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers, but James stayed composed. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about standing up for what was right. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah approached James with a smile. "You handled that with dignity," she said, showing him the video that had already gone viral. James looked at it for a moment, then simply nodded. He didn't need to say much. The truth had spoken for itself. As the last few people drifted away, James stood for a moment, taking it all in. What had started as a moment of humiliation had turned into something much bigger. Proof that standing up for yourself, even in the smallest ways, could make a difference. Sarah patted him on the back and promised to keep spreading the word, knowing this story could inspire others to speak out against unfair treatment. Later that evening, James sat at home, scrolling through messages of support flooding his phone. Friends, co-workers, and even strangers were reaching out, sharing their own experiences and encouraging him. It felt overwhelming, but also empowering. He realized that change starts with moments like this, when people refuse to stay silent. As for Officer Reynolds, his actions had consequences, and James could finally move forward with his head held high. Justice had found its way in the most unexpected manner, and James knew he wasn't alone.